Thomas Kail, congratulations on receiving your first Emmy nomination for directing Grease Live. How did it feel when you got the news that you'd been nominated?
It was lovely. I'm part of this much larger squad, and the fact that so many different people from our show were nominated, that the show itself was nominated and recognized, and that the work, of the whole was acknowledged was the most meaningful thing. I mean, ultimately, as a director, my job is to try to put together a team with the studio, the good people at Fox, Paramount, and then Mark Platt, and make sure that everybody who comes into the room knows what they're doing and how they're supposed to work. And so the fact that there were, a few nominations made me feel like people that worked really hard behind the scenes you don't get to see were acknowledged. So it was a lovely thing.
Well, this has been quite a awards-filled year for you. You just won your first Tony for Hamilton, which is a little show that some people have heard about.
Opening soon.
I want to ask you about that. I mean, leading up to the Tony Awards, you guys have gotten this record number of nominations. You were the show that everyone was talking about. Were you still nervous about whether or not you were going to win, or just be the biggest losers in Tony history? Or
well, the biggest losers in Tony history seemed like a great thing to have on a newspaper. So that way. Look, that was another instance. That was a show I worked on for 5 years, and the fact that all of the designers were recognized, that actors in a number of categories, that the show was recognized. It felt like we were all going to the party no matter what, and I think we were all so proud to be part of this season. It was such a remarkable year on Broadway, and so you figure by the law of averages, some people are going to come home with some statues and some aren't, but we were all there together. So no matter what happened, we were so thrilled to be in the building, and that night felt like that. I mean, we were cheering on our friends both in our show and outside of our show. It was a fun night, and it felt like a celebration of something much larger than Hamilton.
Absolutely, yeah. So talking about Grease,
I keep on looking at your face, so I'm so that I'm sure, all the kids are like, just look in the thing. But so my training as a human is to look at you. So I hope that my outline isn't too bad.
I do the same thing, so I think we're okay.
I appreciate it. I'll see you on Snapchat.
I'll see you there. So getting back to Grease Live,
yes.
Getting involved with that, obviously Grease is a big property that everyone loves and knows. So what were your initial ideas for doing it as a live television production?
My initial idea, sort of the big idea that I talked about with Mark Platt and Paramount Fox really early, I mean, before I even had the job, was I wanted to show the wiring. I wanted us to be aware of not only that we were making it live, but how we were making it live. And so that was an ethos that we tried to extend throughout the entire show. And John Tollins and Rob Carey, who wrote the show, all of our early conversations were, how can we celebrate this form? How can we say, yes, we're making this live in 12 acts on television. It's happening right now. Mother Nature decided to rain that day, which we didn't have control over, but actually sort of added to this feeling of, oh, right, whatever happens, we're going to incorporate. And then, a lot of those really early conversations, it's where we talked about having a live audience. It's where we talked about having an opening number, with Grease is the word, that showed behind the scenes, and doing it in one shot was something we talked about really early with Alex Rosinski, our television director, and Zach Willey, our choreographer. Ending the show with a curtain call. That was something that we talked about very early. Again, just to sort of put these capstones on. And then stuff sort of evolved throughout the course of it. At the end of the first act, after Summer Nights, we sort of end, and you see the split screen, which is, this acknowledgement of what we loved so much from the film. And then we pop to a completely different shot all the way down the line, and you saw Mario Lopez, and you then saw the cast in that position with the cameras, you saw the rigging, and then you also saw the cast run to their next location. And there was something about that we felt really actually contributed to the fact that this was happening now, and let the audience participate. And so that was something that we talked about really early on with David Korins, my production designer, as well.
And he's the same guy who worked with you on Hamilton. In fact, a lot of the people who worked on Hamilton kind of came over with you on this. Is that right?
David came over. There were a bunch of people from the theater community. William Ivey Long was someone that I knew but hadn't worked with yet. Mark Platt was someone who did a couple things on Broadway, Wicked, and a few movies that we might have heard of. So David was the only person from Hamilton that came over. But there were certainly, friends from there. Tom Kitt, who was our music supervisor, an orchestrator and arranger, was a friend of mine for 10 years who'd worked with, Lynn and a bunch of my pals on Bring It On, but I'd actually only known Tom sort of socially and hadn't worked on him. So it felt like a chance to have very smart people that I had met socially come and try to crack this thing.
Right. So talk about working with your TV director, Alex Rudinsky. Is that?
Yeah.
Rudinsky. Okay, I knew I could pronounce that name. Talk about the two of you working together to make this not just a taping of a live event, but it feels very much, dare I say, a little cinematic in some ways,
Yes.
So talk about collaborating.
Absolutely. It was really fun getting a chance to work with Alex. Alex obviously had hundreds and hundreds of hours of experience capturing storytelling through dance, and did that on broadcast television, 40 weeks a year. So I knew that his understanding of how to tell story, in some of the larger numbers was going to be really expert. And the thing about Grease that we were excited about is there is a lot of movement in storytelling through dance. So that was a new thing, so Alex, Zach, and I talked about that a lot early. And one of the things that we were really conscious of is I didn't want to make a show and then have Alex come in and figure out how to capture it. So Alex was in on so many early design meetings with David Korins and Mark Platt, so that we were building the world for it to exist on television live in that way. And getting Alex's input, and Al Gurdon, our lighting designer, as early as possible allowed it to feel organic and unified. And I think that, Alex coming in to spend time in rehearsal with us as we were making it allowed Alex and I also to have conversations weeks and weeks before we got on set about things that he thought that could be challenges, and maybe I could solve with staging, or if there was a different idea that I could come up with in the calm of the studio instead of those last 2 or 3 weeks when you're on stage and kind of building it. So it was a very fruitful collaboration and a really fun one. And then we would then sit in the truck and watch every scene, and Platt would be there and Zach would be there for a lot of it, and just talk about how we wanted it to look and feel. And his instincts were so sharp. And we also made a decision to shoot the show in 24p. So it's 24 frames, which is much more filmic than television, which is around 29.9 and 30. So it just has a different feeling to the quality of that. And I think that was something that also was really important for us.
Right. I mean, it all does feel very seamless, of a whole.
Thank
right?
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So speaking of that rehearsal process, take us there. Specifically, I want to ask about working with your cast, because obviously these are really iconic roles that they're playing. So talk about working with them to make the characters their own, and while still honoring the legacy, or, what was that like?
It was something we embraced. The reality is we were there because of that film. We were there because of that stage version. So to not tip our hat in different ways felt like we were, sort of not taking advantage of the moment. And it was also very clear that, the impact of John Travolta and Olivia and Stockard Channing and Dee Dee and on down the line, and Barry Pearl and all of these people was so profound on us that we had to work really hard to try to make it our own, and know that a lot of people watching it would have those performances indelibly burned into their brains and their hearts, as did we. But yet we were trying to make something that could exist on its own. And I think the important thing was for us was just kind of talk about that, to not pretend it wasn't true. And the reality is there are things that Aaron did, that Aaron found in the rehearsal room a couple weeks in, because he sort of had to go through the process of exploring this character as if it was a new character. And there really isn't a role in Grease that we don't have some relationship to. So it was something that I talked about with Keke Palmer, with Marty, with Heather playing Jan. I mean, all the way down the line, with Carly and Frenchie, and having Dee Dee there was actually something, that I was very proud of, and really felt like it was our way of saying, this film, which moved you, moved us. This story, which spoke to you, spoke to us. And so having Dee Dee and Barry there felt really right. It felt like we were trying to honor their spirit, and also let them continue to be part of this event, which for us was about a feeling. Can we capture that feeling that they did so well?
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys also, from how I understand it, you took elements from the original Broadway play as well that didn't make it into the original film, and
Right.
that kind of helped strengthen some characters in a sense, added numbers and things like that.
Yes, and one of the things that John Tollins and Rob Carey and I talked about a lot with Platt early on is we could cherry pick. We could take the spine of the film. That's the thing that most people knew. And the film really focuses on the love story, whereas the stage play is more ensemble based. And so we could take an opportunity to be, with Duty and do magic changes, even though that only exists, in background music in the film, or Freddie, My Love, an opportunity to, for us, really show what we were trying to accomplish, that we could be on a 3-wall set and then walk through a wall, watch a costume change happen, and be in a completely different location. Grease allows you to do that because it has numbers that elevate and go to a fantasy. So that was a number that started in the bedroom and ended at the USO and then goes back to the bedroom. There's Grease Lightning, which starts in the shop, goes to this sort of heightened version, and then comes back down, and as does Beauty School Dropout. So they all sort of start on Earth and then float up and then come back down. And we thought with each of those, we had an opportunity to build out the world, and also show this inherent theatricality in the way we were telling the story.
It is really interesting to see the way that you guys solve certain problems of
Served is actually a good word for it. I mean, that's what because when you're doing a revival, you are servicing something, right? Like, we have an idea of what it is, so we want to make you feel satisfied with that. We want you to say, you know what, they did it in their way, but it does access that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I was just going to ask, I mean, what would you say was one of the greatest challenges that you faced in blocking certain things, like, say, the car race or certain scene changes or things like that, blocking something so you can pull it off on the air and make it look good and look seamless?
Well, those magic changes is a good example of that. That was a number that existed in the stage play in a quite different way, but our writers came up with this pretty ingenious idea, which is, let's show that really great sequence in the film where Danny goes from sport to sport to sport, trying to evolve, trying to change, and use that song as the frame for it, because you can't do those quick cuts in quite the same way when you only have one person who has to do the 4 costume changes. So what we did was we designed it for one shot. And so what we made certain was that off camera, we had the time for Duty to also have an evolution as Danny's having his evolution. And that's all one continuous shot. And so it feels a little bit like a magic trick, even though 6 inches off camera out of that lens was like a furious, very coordinated dresser. And I mean furious in the motion, not like how upset they were. Making sure that this change could happen while this happened, and then total calm, and then that would happen again. So that felt like something that we really tried to come up with a cogent way to solve that. And in the car race, which is not in the stage version. In the stage version, there's like a rumble that doesn't happen. It's kind of like an anti-West Side Story. There's no rumble. But if you watch how we made the car race, and Alex had lots of great ideas here as well, is those cars didn't move until the last 10 seconds of the race. And it's like an 80-second sequence or something like that. And that's all done with camera angle and handheld and smoke and wind machines. And so that also felt like a tip of the cap to, the movies of the day, how they were making things then, and sort of using old school technology.
Right, absolutely. It definitely felt that way.
Okay.
Now I'm getting an echo. So take us there on the day. I know there was a monster rainstorm that almost knocked you guys out. So, but what was the feeling backstage and on the day?
There was a real sense of calm from the cast and confidence. I mean, I think that we'd been through a lot. We'd prepared. The show that we did on Sunday was our 5th run through and our 3rd with an audience. So it was very important to me when I was designing the schedule with the other producers to make sure that we had routined the show so frequently that the actors had the ability to feel free. And that only comes from giving them repetition and confidence, because when the red light of the camera is on, as I like to think, it's like an x-ray machine for confidence. So if I haven't prepared them well enough, that's on me, that's not their fault. So before we left the studio, when we were just rehearsing in the rehearsal hall, we probably ran the show 5 or 6 times in its entirety. So you're going to go away from that when you start to pull it apart and put the cameras in and move everything on stage and add lights and costumes. So I wanted them to feel like they really knew how the story would be told, beginning, middle, and end, without stopping. Because on the day, you started that first downbeat and you go through that curtain call. So I think there was a sense of readiness from the cast and the crew. I mean, I can't say enough about this crew. One of the things we also talked about a lot with the cast is this is for all of us. This is not just about the people on camera. We are also celebrating the 400 people that work off stage that you never get to see. And that's why a lot of these nominations were so meaningful, because it was teams of people that don't get on air, and yet their work was acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. So what is so extraordinary about this production is that it really is a wonderful, perfect blending of theater and film and television. I mean, the best of both worlds kind of come together in this thing. Why do you think these live productions of Broadway musicals have been so popular as of late?
I think it's because people want to gather around the campfire. There's very few things aside from, conventions. It's politics, it's debates, it's sports, it's events that actually bring us together. And I think that there's an appetite for people to experience something at the same time. And because of the nature of DVR and so many portable devices, we don't generally watch things as a group. And this is not lamenting the fact that there's more than 3 channels, because there are more than 3 channels for a long time now. But I think that, all of those, that came before us, not only The Wiz, Peter Pan, and Sound of Music, working backwards, and the original Peter Pan, but going back to Playhouse 90 and Omnibus and U.S. Steel, those were a lot of things that we watched. Rod Serling and and Patterns and Mickey Rooney and The Comedian and Bang the Drum Slowly, and those those men and women that worked doing these live things, in the 40s and 50s, really in the late 40s, but mostly the early 50s and 60s, where there wasn't any technology, and the world came out to see them. And I think that it's actually somewhere in our DNA still that we want to come together and have collected experience.
It's certainly a way for a lot of people to see these shows as well. I mean, any possibility that something like Hamilton could be put on live television, because it might be 4 or 5 years before some of us get to see that.
But we're coming to a town near you. Hamilton was designed to be seen in the theater,
right.
And so, just speaking, creatively about it, Grease was designed to be seen on television. And in some way, I think it might not serve Hamilton to make it into that, because that's not what the original intent was. Hamilton is a show about the original intent of the authors, of the framers of this country. And my job is to honor that spirit, whomever I work with. So, one of the things that we're grappling with Hamilton is it's a show a lot of people want to see, but it's only in one place. But in 6 weeks, it'll be in Chicago. And then in 4 months, it'll be in San Francisco. And so I'm so excited for us to take the show to somebody's town and say, you go to your job, wake up in your bed, and then come see the show at a theater that you know. You don't have to travel to us. Let us travel to you. And in essence, that's very similar to what Grease did. Grease said, you stay where you are. We're going to come to you. And so that, to me, is what the touring companies of Hamilton can hopefully be.
When you guys were working on that show, Hamilton, I mean, did you realize it was going to be such a phenomenon? I mean, the timing of it couldn't be more perfect in a way, because it's so much about the reinterpretation of history. And I mean, did you realize it was going to be this huge phenomenon when you were making it?
No. I mean, we were just trying to make it better on Thursday than it was on Wednesday. And Lynn wrote the first song in 2009. We started working on it in 2011. So, the fact that there was a confluence of events that it happened to emerge in the world formed when I think, the country was open to it and ready for it, has to do with a lot of things that were well beyond our control. But the job is always the same of making something for 100 people or 500 people or 1 million people. Make sure the storytelling is true. Make sure everybody that's working on it knows what their job is, and that we try to make things in a way that allows us to feel safe to be creative. And I think there is an energy that Grease had, that Hamilton has, that is very consistent, and that's the kind of environment that I want to help create and work to create, whatever I'm working on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your Emmy nomination and your Tony win. And it was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And this is definitely the most advanced technological thing that I've done since. So I'm glad that it all worked out.
I am too.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.